Bhuteshu Upacharyate Avyakritasya Anantasya Ayanade Jagadatmanaha. The duration of the two parts of Brahma's life, as above mentioned, is calculated to be equal to 1 nimesh, less than a second, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is unchanging and unlimited and is the cause of all causes of the universe. So in the last 5 verses of the chapter, we will be discussing about the ultimate limit of time control. So in the previous verses, we had discussed the life of the Manu and the duration of the life of Brahma, established that from a kalpa, how it grows. And now Maitreya, he says that, and this is 1 nimesh of Mahavishnu. So a nimesh is actually half a second, or 8/15th of a second. And Prabhupada says that this is also confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. In the verse, Yaseka Nishwasita Kalamatha Valambya Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagadandanata Vishnu Maha Sahiyasya Kala Vishesha Govindamadi Purusham Tamham Bhajami. So, Yasha Eka Nishwasita Kala Athavalambya. Yasha Eka Nishwasita Kalam Athavalambya. So it says that only one of his breath, Nishwasita, is the life of Brahma. So Vishwanath Chakravarti makes the point that actually the lifespan of the Brahmas or of infinite Brahmas can never be equal to a second of the Lord. Why? Because if there is a notion of the Lord getting older by a second, however long it takes, then it defeats the notion of the fact that he's eternal. So he says that this is just to show that from Lord Vishnu's perspective, the life of Brahma is like a spark. It is nothing. And that is why Maitreya, when he makes this comparison, he qualifies it by saying that the Lord is avyakritasya, that he is unchanged, anantasya, unlimited, anadi, beginless, and jagadatmana, he is the soul of the universe. So somebody who is unchanged and unlimited and beginningless, so there is no question of the person being influenced by time, however minute that influence is. So this is just to indicate that this vast life of Brahma is negligible when it is seen from the perspective of Lord Mahavishnu. And Srila Prabhupada says that the time has no ability to control the personality of Godhead because he's the controller of the time. Then in the spiritual world, there is undoubtedly time. And we see that. Otherwise, there would be no Ashtakali Leela. Ashtakali Leela means that there are 8 kals within the day. There is a morning and there is a night. So there is time, but the difference is that it has no control over activities. It is existing over there to serve the Lord and the devotees. So in the material world, time is the supreme controller. That even a person may become powerful as Brahma, has to eventually succumb to time. But in the spiritual world, time is there to serve the pleasure of the Lord. Verse 39. Kaloyan pramanvadi dvi praradhanta ishvaraha nevishitan prabhurbhumna ishvarudhamamanina. Eternal time is certainly the controller of different dimensions, from that of the atom up to the superdivision of the duration of Brahma's life. But nevertheless, it is controlled by the Supreme. Time can control only those who are body conscious, even up to the Satyalok or the other higher planets of the universe. So in this description of time, we saw that we went from a Truti, which is 8 upon 13,500 of a second, to the Dvi Prarabdha. So Dvi Prarabdha is 311 trillion 40 billion human years. And if you convert it into seconds, it comes out to be 10 to the power of 22 of our seconds. So we see that in this chapter, we have gone from almost 10 to the power of minus 4 to 10 to the power of 22. So huge order of magnitude we have gone. So one would get the sense that time is expansive. It has such a wide range, but nevertheless, it is controlled by the Supreme Lord. And the verse further says that not only is the Supreme Lord independent of the control of time, but those who are not body conscious are also independent. It presents it in the reverse way, that only those who are body conscious, even up to Satyalok or the other higher planets of the universe, are under the control of time. So the flip side is that even the jivas who are not body conscious, even they are beyond the control of time. That is why the soul is called Sat, means eternal. It has never born, never dies, never ages, never changes, never grows old. All these are the impacts of time, and it is completely independent of it. So it's interesting that after speaking so much about time, Maitreya is now minimizing time. But actually, he's glorifying bhakti. So the point that he's making is, and that was the purpose of him discussing time, that time is invincible, inevitable, indefatigable. So it's something that impossible to find. And then he talked about the range of the time, from the minutest to the largest. And then he says all this power of time, it is easily subdued by the process of bhakti. So really speaking, it's a glorification of the potency of bhakti and also an encouragement for one to take to the process. So with that verse, Maitreya concludes the description of time. So let's go to the next verse now, verse 40. Vikarehi sahita yukte visheshadbhiravrataha andakosho bahirayam panchashat koti vistraha. This phenomenal material world is expanded to a diameter of 4 billion miles as a combination of 8 material elements transformed into 16 further categories within and without as follows. So Maitreya moves from time to space very briefly. He only speaks a few verses about space, and his intention is to not to give an exhaustive description of the universe, but just to show that just like time is expansive, so is the dimensions of the universe expansive, but the universe is covered by the Lord. So again, to make the point that despite its greatness, it is a minuscule entity before the Lord. And so Srila Prabhupada says that the material world, it's a display of 16 diversities and 8 material elements as per the Sankhya philosophy. So the 16 are the 11 senses. So these are the 10 senses, the 5 Gyanendriya, the 5 Karmendriyas, and the mind. So these are the 11 senses. Then the 5 sense objects, and then the 8 elements, which are the Panch Mahabhutas, and the 3 subtle elements. So all these combined are distributed throughout the entire universe, which is 4 billion miles in diameter. And then Prabhupada says that this is just our universe, which is one of the smallest universe. And there are other universes that are much, much bigger than ours. And all of them are clustered under similar material elements as described in the next verse. Verse 41. Dashotra Parveshtha Paramanuva Lakshate Antargataschanye Kotishu Hayanandarashayaha. The layers or elements covering the universes are each 10 times thicker than the one before. And all the universes clustered together appeared like atoms in a huge combination. So we're getting a visual understanding of the creation of the material universes. That there is the universe. Our universe is 4 billion miles, and then it is covered of the elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And each one of them is 10 times more. So the first covering is earth, which is 40 billion miles. And the next is water, which is 400 billion. And then there is fire, which is 10 times greater. Then there is water, that is 10 times greater. And then finally there is ether, which is 10 times greater, and so on. And despite its vast sizes, from the perspective of Mahavishnu, they appear like an atom. So they are like clusters of atom. Prabhupada says the number of universes is unknown. And even to those who can estimate the coverings of the universe. So the point is making is that it is difficult to establish the size of the material world. Now we say that the material world is 1/4 of the creation, which means that the spiritual world is 3 times the size of the material world, the Ekpad and Tripad. But actually, they are both infinite. The material world is also infinite, the spiritual world is also infinite. And in its infiniteness, the spiritual world is 3 times the size of the material world. Okay, verse 42, sorry. Tadahuraksharan Brahma Sarvakaran Karanam Vishnurdham Param Saksha Purushasya Mahatmanaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is therefore said to be the original cause of all causes. Thus, the spiritual abode of Vishnu is eternal without a doubt. And it is also the abode of Mahavishnu, the origin of all manifestations. So what is Maitreya doing here? So he has established the tremendous greatness of the universe. So he talked about time, from the time of an atom to the time of the universe. Then he talked about the size, 4 billion. Then he talked about the covering, the 5 coverings, each 10 times larger. And then he said all these look like atoms to Mahavishnu. So one can imagine the greatness of Mahavishnu. And here he is saying that Krishna is the cause of Mahavishnu. So one can understand the greatness of Krishna. So that is the feeling that he wants to instill in us. Prabhupada would say that once you know how great Krishna is, then you will automatically surrender to him. So these sets of verses are there to instill that sense of awe towards the Lord. And Prabhupada writes that Mahavishnu is he's lying on the causal ocean in Yoga Nidra, and he's creating innumerable universes by his breathing processes. And all these universes are temporarily appearing in the Mahatattva for temporary manifestation of the material world. And this Mahavishnu is a plenary portion of Krishna. So although he is non-different from Krishna, his formal appearance in the material world as an incarnation is temporary. The original form of the personality of Godhead is actually the Swarup, or real form. And he eternally resides in the Vaikuntha world, Vishnu Lok. The word Mahatmana is used here to indicate Mahavishnu. And his real manifestation is Lord Krishna, who is called Param, as confirmed in Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachidananda Vigra, Nadir Adir Govinda, Sarvakaran Karana. So it's interesting to note that Srila Prabhupada characterizes Mahavishnu as a temporary form in the material world. So the temporary form is understood in the context of the manifestation. So obviously Mahavishnu is Vishnu Tattva. He can't be temporary. But the example that is given is of the Archa Vigraha. That the Archa Vigraha is the Lord. But because he takes a material form, it is okay to call it temporary. Similarly, Mahavishnu is non-different from Krishna and is eternal. But because he is manifesting in the material world, from that perspective, and Jiva Goswami also makes the same point in the Sandarbhas. So he interprets Aksharam as cannot be described by words. So Aksharam is used in the context of Mahavishnu. So he says that he cannot be described by word since he appears and disappears as a pastime. However, the highest form, Swayam Bhagwan, can be described since his manifestation is eternal. Thus, he is called Tad Ahu, one who can be described. He is called the Paramdham or the supreme Amshi of Mahavishnu. So that's how we reconcile this statement in Prabhupada's purport characterizing Mahavishnu as temporary. So this is the last verse in the 11th chapter. We'll do a quick recap. That the chapter is essentially a calculation of time from the atom, and it begins by creating a perspective of time by first describing matter, by describing Anu, a Parmanu, a Trishang, Anu, and then saying that the time it takes for the sun to travel is 130. So then that's how from matter time is calculated. And then using time as factors, longer periods of time are calculated, from seconds to hours to days, to the lives of human beings, to the lives of the demigods, Pitras and Devas, to the yugas, and from the yugas to the manvantras, the kalpas, and then finally the dvipraras. So we went through that expansion of the calculation of time. Then there's a brief discussion of the devastations, followed by another description of the lifespan of Brahma. And then we concluded by showing how the time with all its expanse, the universe with all its hugeness, is completely insignificant and under the control of the Lord. So it's a logical break. I can stop here and see if there is any discussions about this chapter or the verse that we covered.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. One thought I'm having is, we say, the five elements and all that, they are all material in a way. But since its origin is spiritual, is, Mahavishnu, ultimately Krishna, I mean, in a way, everything is spiritual, no?
And that is true. Everything has its origin in the spiritual world. It becomes material based on our perception.
Because if we use everything in the service of Krishna, we say, no, everything becomes spiritual. I mean, it becomes a complete circle again.
Yeah, or complete circle, or it doesn't move from the point of origin. Yes. It was spiritual, we misinterpreted it as material. When we stop misinterpreting it, then it returns to the same point, that it is That is spiritual. Prabhupada would make this point all the time that things are only material because we look at them as separate from Krishna.
That means it's only a perception, no?
Yes.
How it's perceived.
Yes. Yes. It's our perception.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
This would also be the opening verses in the next chapter. That why do we consider it? It does not address this specifically the way that you have framed the question, but the discussion is about avidya. That what is it that causes us to consider things as material? So very related to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna. I'm just looking at verse number 40. The phenomenal world is expanded to a diameter of 4 billion miles, the combination of 8 material elements, and then goes on to explain that each the covering of the universe, each covering starting from Earth is 10 times thicker or denser, whatever. It's not a question, but it's like more of a comment. It sounds very bewildering. By the time you reach the false ego, it's like thousands of billions of miles. It means that if we are locked away in this way in the material world, there's no way that we could get out. When you think about the thick layers that are covering the universe.
It does take a long time. In the later cantos of the Bhagavatam, there's the pastime of Krishna taking Arjuna to Mahavishnu. So he takes him through these 10 layers, to these 5 layers, and he experiences. Of course, Krishna's chariot is going really fast, but he experiences in flash these layers, and then he enters into the causal ocean, and then he crosses over the part of the causal ocean and reaches Mahavishnu. So the distances are phenomenal, but the ability of the soul to travel is also phenomenal. Our material bodies have, of course, limitations. Even the yogis can travel at the speed of the mind, but Prabhupada would say that a yogi traveling at the speed of mind would take 40,000 years to reach Brahmalok. So this is just within the universe. So materially conditioned, yes, it is really, really huge and immense. But again, this is Prabhupada's words that as soon as you become Krishna conscious, that very moment, you say that very lover, you are in the spiritual world. It doesn't take too long. So I'm guessing there's a different path, like there's a wormhole or something like that. I'm speculating over here, but there's a spiritual path that takes us back to Godhead. Actually, it is said that when the soul goes back to Godhead, it actually travels through all the layers. That as it travels through each of the layers, that particular part of the body is dissolved. And then when he takes, when he enters the Vairajya, the consolation, then the last vestige of material contamination, the ego is washed away. So when he emerges from Vairajya, at that point, fully spiritual.
A question could be: does each one of the universes have the same composition?
Oh, it's a good question. Don't know the answer to that. It is, Prabhupada of course says in this purport only that they have different sizes, and our universe is amongst the smallest. But I don't remember reading about the composition of the other universes. So for some reason, Prem Kishore Prabhu, I'm getting this, somebody is waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah, I just cleared out, Prabhu. That's the reason I took some time. Someone, I don't know who were hosted over the weekend, they changed the settings.
Oh, I see. Okay, no worries.
So I just changed it. Now no one will have any problem.
Okay.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Just one quick clarification. The 4 billion miles is, I know it refers to our universe, right? The smallest one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's our universe.
Okay.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, we can start with the 12th chapter. Title of the chapter is Creation of the Kumars and Others. So in this chapter, Maitreya will describe the creations of Brahma. And primarily he will describe Rudra, the Chaturkumar, and Swayambhavu Manu. These three creations. So the chapter has 57 verses. Most of the verses do not have a purport. So because they're narratives there, so I'm hoping to go through it relatively quickly. I've also compiled a table, and Prem Kishore Prabhu has shared it. So it kind of gives a bird eye view of what the verses are saying, especially from verse 21 till 43, where the different aspects of the society are created. I'm saying 21 till from 21 to 47. Okay, 3:12:1. Maitre Vacha iti teva nitakshataha Kalakhya Paramatmanaha Mahima Vedagarbhutha Yatha Asrakshin Nibodhame. Sri Maitreya said, O learned Vidur, so far I've explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature as Kal. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. So the creation of Brahma is actually means the creations by Brahma, because Brahma has already been created. So these are essentially Visargas. So in the first three verses, the Agyan Vrittis, the five kinds of ignorances are going to be described that basically cause the conditioned soul to live in the material world. And then after describing these five ignorances, Maitreya will discuss the more specific Visargas, the secondary creation. So the reason he starts off by talking of these five Agyan Vrittis is to answer this implicit question that why do the souls stay in the material world? So it's like a prison house has been made, The king has come to inspect it, and he'll say, okay, how do you make sure that the prisoners stay in before he even inspecting the prison house? So there is a lock over here, and there is a wall over there, there is a moat over there. So in the same way, there are 5 Agyan Vrittis. Okay. Verse 2. Sasarjagre andatamishram athatamishram adikrat mahamoham chamoham cha tamaschagya vrittayaha. Brahma first created the nascent engagements, the niscient engagements, like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. So these are the 5 ignorances that he created, which keep the soul trapped within the material world. They are not intrinsically present in the jiva, but they are externally imposed upon him. So what are the 5 kinds of avidya? The first is tamaha, which Prabhupada describes as darkness in self-knowledge. Vishwanath Chakravarti describes it as ignorance of the swarup of the jiva. So I have 4 descriptions for each of the avidyas, which are very similar, but they give us a little bit of a more understanding. I've shared the table also, so you don't have to write it. So tamaha is darkness and self-knowledge, or ignorance of the swarup of the jiva, that I am a spirit soul. Vishnu Puran says that tama is lack of discrimination between matter and spirit. And the Yoga Sutras call it avidya. The second is moham. Prabhupada calls it the illusory conception. Vishwanath Chakravarti says it's the identification of the self within the body. The Vishnu Puran says it's the mistaken identification in the mind. And the Yoga Sutra says it is asmita. So one avidya feeds into another, and in this way they make each other stronger. So just like a single strand is easy to break, or 5 strands are easy to break, but if they are braided, then they are much more difficult to braid. So similarly, these avidyas, they are nourishing each other. So when gets caught in the net, then it is difficult to escape. So from avidya comes asmita. From the lack of discrimination comes the mistaken identification in the mind. Then mahamoham is, as per Prabhupada, the ownership of enjoyable objects. Vishwanath Chakravarti says possessiveness of objects of enjoyments. Vishnu Puran says the desire for happiness from material objects, and the Yoga Sutra says this is rag. And tamishram is anger upon frustration, which all 3 basically say anger, which is dvesh. So as we know, from rag comes dvesh. And then we have andatamishram, which is the sense of death. The Vishwanath Chakravarti says is the unconscious state brought on by anger, the consequence of anger. Vishnu Puran says it is death, and the Yoga Sutra says Abhinivesh. Abhinivesh literally translates to the pervading fear of death. So according to the Yoga Sutra, it is Avidya, Smita, Raga, Dvesh, Abhinivesh. And as per the Bhagavatam, it is Tama, Moham, Mahamoham, Tamishram, Andatamishram. So these are the 5 kinds of ignorances that are capturing the living entities. Vishnu Swami, he says that these 5 ignorances are created by Maya. So Maya has 2 potencies, the Avarna potency, which is the covering potency, and because of that, the Tamaha, ignorance, is created, or the Avidya, as per the Yoga Sutras. And there is the Vikshepa, or the throwing potency, because of which the Asmita, Rag, Dvesh, and Abhinivesh, or the Moha, Mahamoha, Tamishram, and Andatamishram. So, under the influence of Maya, these 5 are created. Okay, verse 3. Drishtva papyasim shrishtim natmanam bhavam amanyata bhagvadhyanuputena mansanyam tato srijat. Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahma did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another form of creation. So this and the following verses show the functions of Vidya. So the Chaturkumar, they appear as the personification of Vidya. And the principle that is being demonstrated over here is that Vidya destroys Avidya. That because Brahma felt bad at creating Avidya, he wanted to create something to nullify it. So he created the 4 Kumars. Now, one may wonder also, so the 4 Kumars, as we mentioned earlier, are in the category of the Jivas who have a life as long as Brahma. So the question here is that how can we understand that Brahma created the 4 Kumars? So Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that this is a specific reference to the creation that happens on the first day of the Dviprara. Gives the reference of 3:11:36 Bhagavatam. So this is the present Kalpa. So in the Kalpa prior to the present Kalpa, even though it is the end of the Kalpa, but the extent of the annihilation is more pervasive. It does not spare the upper 4 worlds, which is why the entities over there, like Brahma, they also enter the body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu. And Brahma appears first, and now he's making the Kumars and Bhrigu, Muni, and others appear. Jiva Goswami in Krama Sandarbha, he says that verses 3 and 4 together indicate that Brahma made manifest what was already created in the Brahma Kalpa when he created in the 3 worlds. So the 4 Kumars were already there, but basically he, so to speak, extracted them from the body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu. Verse 4. Sankhancha sanadam cha sanatanam atatambuhu sanat kumaran cha muni niskriyanu dvareta saha. in the beginning, Brahma created 4 great sages named Sanak, Sanandan, Sanatan, and Sanat Kumar. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semen flowing upwards. So we'll see in 3 verses, 4, 5, and 6, the birth of the 4 Kumars from Vidya. So the 4 aspects of the Vedas, which is Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya, and Tapas, appears in the form of the 4 Kumars. And since Vidya is useless without Bhakti, it is also present in all these 4 items as a secondary. So the 4 Kumars are considered to be Mishra Bhaktas. And Bhakti as the principal element takes the form of Narad Muni. So Prabhupada in the purport writes that Brahma created the principles of Nishayans as a matter of necessity for the living entities who are destined to ignorance by the will of the Lord. But then he says that he was not satisfied by such a thankless job. So he created the 4 principles of knowledge. And what are they? So Sankhya is the empirical philosophy for the analytical study of the material conditions. And then Yoga is mysticism for the liberation of the soul from material bondage. Vairagya is the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate to spiritual understanding. And tapas is different kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. So Brahma created these 4 sages, Sanak, Sananda, Sanatan, and Sanat, and then he entrusted them the 4 principles. The Prabhupada doesn't say that which principle was entrusted to him, to which, and I could not also find. I'm not sure if there is a description of whether each of the 4 Kumars controlled part of all the 4 principles, or they personified a particular principle. Generally, they are collectively considered to be the representation of the knowledge of Brahma. They are the Shakti Veshavtar of Krishna, representing his Gyan Shakti. So Prabhupada says that, as was mentioned earlier, that they're also devotees, Mishra Bhaktas, because nothing can be successful without component of Bhakti. So he says that they inaugurated their own spiritual party or sampradaya called the Kumar Sampradaya. So this is one of the 4 Vaishnava Sampradaya, which is later called Nimbarka Sampradaya for the advancement of Bhakti. All these great sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. Verse 5. Tan bhavashe svabhuputra praja srajata putrakaha tan naichan moksha dharmano vasudeva parayanaha. Brahma spoke to his sons after generating them. My dear sons, he said, now generate progeny. But due to their being attached to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they aimed at liberation, and therefore they expressed their unwillingness. So in the previous word, it was saying that they were powerful because of the semen flowing upwards. So that is the That is a characterization of a Naishtik Brahmachari, one who is a a lifelong celibate. That the semen nourishes the brain. So here they explicitly refuse because they were keen in following the moksha dharmana. And Prabhupada explains that the reason they could refuse the orders of their father is also given in the verse, which is Vasudeva Parayana. So generally speaking, it is considered to be sinful to disobey the orders of your father, especially if the father is Lord Brahma. But the four Kumars were able to do it because of a higher purpose. The Prabhupada quotes this. It's a popular verse. Prabhupada quotes it often. It comes in the 11th canto, 5th chapter. Deva Rishi Bhutap Tananam Pitanam Nakin Kurunayam Ranina Charajan Sarvatmanayah Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukandam Parihritya Kartam. Basically, what it says that Deva Rishi Bhutab Nanam Pitanam Pitranam, that all your debts to the demigods, the fathers, the sages, the relatives, other living entities, they are all immediately paid off if Gato Mukundam, if you take shelter of Lord Krishna. So while the four Kumars are not considered to be Shuddha Bhaktas, they're Keval Bhaktas. But the point that is made is that the potency of Bhakti is so powerful that even if it is present along with something else, it still gives one freedom from the reactions of material dharma. In Bhagavad Gita 7:16, that verse Chaturveda Bhajante Mam, Artharthi, Jigyasu Gyani. So 4 kinds of people are mentioned. And in the category of Gyani, the 4 Kumars are mentioned. Verse 6. Suavadhyata Shuterevam Pratyakhyatana Shunaha Krodham Durvisham Jatam Niyantam Chakrame. On the refusal of the sons to obey the order of their father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that previously Brahma had created avidya, which showed his tamasic nature. And then he created the Kumars, which showed his sattvic nature. So the understanding is that Brahma is adopting the mode best suited to render his service. And Prabhupada makes a similar point that Brahma is in charge of the mode of passion of material nature. Therefore, natural for him to become angry on the refusal of his sons to obey his order. So the anger is because his service to Krishna is being impeded. So you can imagine the situation of Brahma, that he appeared, he prayed, he got benedictions, empowerment, he started creating, he created the 5 kinds of Nishayans, unhappy about it, decided to create something good, created the 4 Kumars, the 4 kinds of Vidya, and they say, sorry, we can't help you any further. Now the 4 Kumars, of course, do help. How do they help? By the sampradaya they established. So people who take shelter of the sampradaya, they render service to Krishna and leave the material world, go back to the spiritual world. So they are providing the highest service, which is why their refusal, while it created anger in Brahma, he did not curse them, because he could understand that this is ultimately for the benefit. And because they were doing it in the mode of devotion, he could understand that it was a higher purpose. But still, he was angry because the flow of his service was disrupted. And Prabhupada says that that is one way that a devotee uses anger. So everything you can use in the service of Krishna, and this is what he says, that when a Vaishnava is being blasphemed, when the name of the Lord is being misinterpreted, the philosophy is being misrepresented, then okay to express anger. When your service is being curtailed, okay to express anger in a constructive way. The Prabhupada would himself show anger, but the difference was that he was never under the influence of anger. There was one of his disciples sharing that he was in Mayapur and he was sitting very happy, talking to everybody, laughing. And then one of his disciples had done some major mistakes. And the disciple came in, and then Srila Prabhupada chastised him very severely, very lot of anger. And the disciple, he was chastised, he left. And then Prabhupada was again laughing, jovial. So he never became angry. He just used anger in the service. Okay. So we'll do this verse and maybe we'll stop after there, or we'll do this verse and stop after that. Diya nigrimanopi Bhruvurmadhyat prajapatah Sadyo jayata tanmanyuh Kumaro nilalohitah. Although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows. As a child mixed blue and red, and a child mixed blue and red was immediately generated. So we'll see in 14 verses, from verse 7 to 20, the birth and the pastimes of Rudras being described. So previously we saw that Brahma, after avidya, generated vidya to destroy avidya. And here we see that just as vidya destroys avidya, avidya will also destroy vidya. So Brahma here is to, so he's angry, which is one of the 5 avidyas, the Tamishra, and that is manifesting as Rudra. So the phrase Tanmanyu means that the anger was brought under control by intelligence. So while he was angry, he controlled it by his intelligence. So Prabhupada says that the face of anger, whether exhibited due to ignorance or knowledge, is the same. So when Brahma tried to curb his anger, he could not do so. And even though he is the supreme being, such anger in its true colors came from between the eyebrows of Brahma as Rudra. in a mixed color. So blue indicates ignorance and red indicates passion. So anger is a product of passion and ignorance. Okay, let me pause here, see if there is any comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Regarding the 5 deceptions that Brahma, 5 ignorance that Brahma created, we know that one of them is anger, which is born out of frustration, and that is material anger, right, Prabhu? And there's a spiritual counterpart where we use the anger for serving the Supreme. So like that, there are any counterparts for other 4 ignorance or anything known about it?
It's a good question. Now, of course, we know that that lust is defined as something that can be used in the service of Krishna. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know if I mean rag. So there are 5 avidyas that are defined, right? So what are the 5 avidyas that at least? So the Yoga Sutras descriptions are more popular. So there is asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh, and then there is avidya. So rag and dvesh obviously can be used in the service. I'm not sure about avidya and abhinivesh. So avidya is basically not knowing who you are, and abhinivesh is constant fear of death. So no, Prabhu, I'm sorry, I don't have a definite answer to your question.
Okay, Prabhu, that's fine.
Okay, so if there are no
Prabhu,
more
it's not a question, but just a nice picture.
This is Brahma being angry at the 4 Kumars.
Yes.
Okay.
And Lord Shiva came out of doing his eyebrow.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, so we'll proceed to verse 8. Savairurodo devana purvajo bhagavan bhavaha namani kuru medhataha sthanani cha jagat kuru. After his birth, he began to cry, "O destiny maker, teacher of the universe, kindly designate my name and place." So this is the action of the Rudra that came from the space between the eyebrows of Lord Brahma. Verse 9. So most of the verses don't have a purport. Iti tasya vacha padmo bhagwan paripalayan abhyadat bhadraya vacha marodeshtat karomite. The all-powerful Brahma, who was born from the lotus flower, pacified the boy with gentle words, accepting his request, and said, "Do not cry. I shall certainly do as you desire." Verse 10. Yaddaro dishura srestha sodvega iva balakaha tatastvam abhidhashanti namna rud iti prajaha. Thereafter, Brahma said, "O chief of the demigods, you shall be called by the name Rudra by all people, because you have so anxiously cried. So the name Rudra is derived from the word Arodhihi. So Arodhi means that one who has cried loudly. So that's how the word Rudra is being given. Verse 11. Hrid Indriyanya Survyoma Vayuragni Jalam Mahi Suryas Chandras Tapaschaiva Sthananya Krikritanite. My dear boy, I have already selected the following place for your residence: the heart, the senses, the air of life, the sky, the air, the fire, the water, the earth, the sun, the moon, and austerity. So Rudra is the presiding deity of Ahankar. So Prabhupada says that in the 3rd chapter, verse 37 of Bhagavad Gita, the principle of Rudra is described. So Krodh is the product of Kam, which is the result of the mode of passion. And when lust and hankering are not satisfied, then Krodh appears, which is the formidable enemy of the conditioned soul. This most sinful and inimical passion is represented as Ahankar, or the false egocentric attitude of thinking oneself to be all and all. Such an egocentric attitude on the part of the conditioned soul, who is completely under the control of material nature, is described in Bhagavad Gita as foolish. The egocentric attitude is a manifestation of the Rudra principle in the heart, wherein Krodh or anger is generated. So in this verse, there are 11 places that are given to Rudra to reside in. So there is Hrit or heart. And this, as Prabhupada explains, is the egocentric attitude, which is the manifestation of the Rudra principle in the heart. So this is the most subtle. Then he says Indriyani, which is the senses. So the anger that develops in the heart is further manifested through various senses, like red eyes and agitated hands and legs. Then third place is Ashuhu, which is Pran or life air. So when a man is angry, he breathes very rapidly, and thus Rudra is represented in the air of life or in the activities of breathing. Then there is Vyom or ether. So sound like the thunder and the roaring of fierce animals. Then Vayu or air, as it dries up everything. Agni or fire, as it burns everything. Jalam or water, as it inundates everything by flooding. Mahi or earth, by its transformation into weapons. Surya or sun, as heat, which is the cause of death and discomfort. Then Chandra or moon, as cold, which is again the cause of death and discomfort. And Tapa or austerity. So asceticism and other practices like yoga or Sankhya or Vairagya without Bhakti produce anger. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that an example of austerity resulting in anger is the prachetas. that they had performed very long 10,000 year austerity underwater. And when they came out, they saw that earth was run over by trees, and they became very angry. And they generated fire from their eyes, and they started burning the whole planet down, or the trees for the whole planet. So this is how from the one Rudra expands into 11 Rudras and lives in the heart, the senses, the life air, in earth, water, fire, air, ether, in sun, moon, and austerity. So it does not mean that these places are exclusive areas of residence of Rudra, because then there would be no hope. But for a person who is under ignorance, these are the places where Rudra can appear. And Prabhupada gives these explanations like, because of ego, anger comes. And because of that, the senses become agitated, the breathing becomes heavy. And one becomes ferocious. One may say things that are hurtful. So these things are breeding grounds for Rudra. The Rudra principle is present over there because Brahma gave it as a place to live. But it's up to us to come under its control. Okay, verse 12. Manyur manur mahinasho mahan chivarata dhvajaha ugrare tabhava kalo vamadevo dritavrata. Lord Brahma said, my dear boy Rudra, you have 11 other names. So other meaning in addition to Rudra. The names are Manyu, Manu, Mahinas, Mahan, Shiv, Ritadwaj, Ugrarita, Bhava, Kal, Vamadev, and Dritavrata. So while it is not mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but in the other scriptures it is mentioned that of the, including the Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned that the most prominent of the 11th Rudras is Shiva. And one thing that you'll also see that in different scriptures, the names of the Rudras are slightly different. So as usual, we just follow what the Bhagavatam tells us. There's a further description of the Rudras that appears in the 6th canto, 6th chapter, where it is said that Sarupa, the wife of Bhuta, gave birth to 10 million Rudras, of whom the 11 principal Rudras were, and then there is the name of the 11 Rudras. Their associates, the ghosts and goblins who were very fearful, were born of the other wife of Bhuta. So there's a slightly different description even in the Bhagavatam of, so the 11 names that are given there are different from the 11 names that are given here. Their origin is also a little different. Here they are saying that they're born from Brahma. There they are saying that Bhutan and Sharup, they had 10 million Rudras, out of which 11 are considered to be the principal Rudras there. Okay, verse 13. Dhir dhriti rasaloma cha niyut sharpi rilambika iravati swadha diksha rudranyo rudratre striyaha. O Rudra, you also have 11 wives called the Rudranis, and they are as follows: Dhi, Triti, Rasala, Uma, Niyut, Sarpi, Ila, Ambika, Iravati, Swadha, and Diksha. So these are the names of the 11 Rudra's wife. It does not say that they are in the same order. So we can't make that that connection. So here the fourth wife's name is Uma, and in the previous verse, Lord Shiva appears as the fifth in the list. So we know that Lord Shiva's wife is called Uma. So that's why I'm not sure if they are in the corresponding as a corresponding list. Verse 14. Granaitani namani sthanani chayayoshnaha ebisrija praja bahavi prajanamasi atpatihi. My dear boy, you may now accept all the names and places designated for you and your different wives. And since you are now one of the masters of the living entities, you may increase the population on a large scale. So you can see that Brahma is focused on his role as a Prajapati. So he first had the Chatur Kumars, they said no. Then he had the 10 Rudras, he gave the 11 Rudras, he gave them 11 wives. And then he's repeating the same instruction that please marry and have children. And Prabhupada indicates that this is the Vedic way, that it's the duty of the father and the son should accept it. That just like the father gives the son a body, the father gives the son a name, the father should also select the wife of the son. Of course, now times are different, but Prabhupada says that this is how it should be. Prabhupada also says that that's how the obedient sons should act, following the instructions of the father. He says the 4 Kumars are an exception, and we discussed why they are, because they had a higher purpose. But otherwise, it's a duty of the son to follow the instructions of the father. Verse 15. Ityadestasva guruna bhagvani lohitaha sattvakriti svabhavena sasarjamatma samaha prajaha. The most powerful Rudra, whose bodily color was blue mixed with red, created many offspring, exactly resembling him in features, strength, and furious nature. So one thing that you will notice in this verse is that it uses a singular tense. So even though the verses are referring to the 11 Rudras, so what the verse says is that the 11 Rudras, they produced sons that resemble their bodily color and strength and furious nature. But it uses Rudra as a collective noun. So that's why it's using it singular. I don't know that much Sanskrit, but that's what the understanding I derived. And so their offspring is Swabhavena. So same nature. Swabhav is nature. So they inherit the same nature, which is a form of blue and red, Akriti. mode of passion and ignorance. And sattva. Sattva is here strength, and same kind of strength. Okay, I'll do maybe 2 more verses, then we'll stop. Rudranam Rudasrushtanam Samantagrastam Jagat Nishamya Sankhyaso Yuta Prajaptir Ashan Kata. The sons and grandsons generated by Rudra were unlimited in number. And when they assembled together, they attempted to devour the entire universe. When Brahma, the father of the living entity, saw this, he became afraid of the situation. So Prabhupada says that this generation of Rudra, the incarnation of anger, were so dangerous that even Brahma became afraid. And then he says that the so-called devotees or followers of Rudra are also a menace. They are sometimes dangerous even to Rudra himself. Descendants of Rudra sometimes make plans to kill Rudra by the grace of Rudra. So this is the pastime of who was that demon that Lord Shiva gave him the benediction that if he put the hand on anybody's head, he would die. And then he ran after Lord Shiva to put his hand on his head. Anybody?
Vikrasura?
What's the name?
Vikrasura? No?
Vrikasur. Yes, yes,
Vikrasura.
yes, yes. It is Vrikasur. So Prabhupada is saying that's the nature of that's the nature of anger, that it does not even respect. Now the Rudras we will see they're a little different, but the future generations got so contaminated that they even try to kill their own preceptor. Okay, so I'll do one more verse and then we'll stop. Alam prajabhihi shratabhir shashtabhir idrishabhi shurottama maya saha dahantibhir dikshas chakshurbhir ulbanahe. Brahma told Rudra, O best among the demigods, there is no need for you to generate living entities of this nature. They have begun to devastate everything on all sides with the fiery flames for their eyes. And they've even attacked me. So Brahma goes and complains. And then next discussion we'll see that how Rudra will react to the request from Brahma. So let me pause here. We have a few minutes and see if there's any discussion.
Prabhu, there's no mention of Sadashiva at all here, no? That this Rudra originated from Sadashiva, something like that.
Yeah, that's not mentioned though. The whole process of the appearance of Lord Shiv from Sadashiv to Lord Shiv to the Rudras, it's not explained in the Bhagavatam.
Where is it explained?
I actually don't know. I have some notes about it, which I took from a lecture that was given a long time ago. But I don't believe I got the reference from where it was spoken.
Mhm.
So it is said that two tattvas are very difficult to understand. One is the Shiva tattva, and the second is the Guru tattva. So difficult to understand that Sadashiv is non-different from Mahavishnu. His planet is in the spiritual world, but then he expands as Lord Shiva, and then there are the Rudras, and Lord Brahma is glorifying them as the best of the devas, and Lord Shiva is called Mahadev. He's the proprietor of the devas. Yet his followers are ghosts and goblins and pisachas. So the mood of Lord Shiva is, and understanding the tattva is difficult. So fortunately, we are not Rudra Sampradaya, otherwise we would be spending a lot of time trying to figure Lord Shiva out.
Thank you, Babu.
Guru Maharaj spoke about it in the Brahma Samhita lecture series. I think that's where even I remember he speaks about Sadashiva.
There's one verse in Brahma Samhita, Kshiram Yathadadi Vikar Vishesha Yogat Sanjayate Nahi Tatha Pratagasti Hetu Yah Shambhutam Api Tatha Samupeti Karyat Govindamadi Purusham Tamam Bhajami, which describes the relationship, Kshiram Yathadadi, that like milk becomes yogurt by the action of acid. So in the same way, Krishna becomes Shiva by the influence of the modes. So they are the same, but they are different because milk can become yogurt, but yogurt can't become milk. And there's actually a much more elaborate, I'm just translating the verse. There's a much more elaborate description by Bhakti Siddhanta on the verse. But it goes back to the point Sayang Prabhu was making, that and there is Sadashiv, who is fully spiritual, and then there is Lord Shiva, who is the glance of Vishnu. So because that glance comes in contact with the Pradhan, which is Sagun Brahman, under the influence of Maya, so that's the transformation that is being described. That because the glance is pure, from a pure source, but because it comes in contact with Maya, which is like the effect of action, acid, so the milk becomes yogurt. But essentially, there's no difference between milk and yogurt. The only difference is that one can become the other, but the other can't become the yogurt can't become the milk.
So the glance is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita a little bit.
You're right. It's explained there a little bit.
Mhm.
It is, I believe, also explained in Laghu Bhagavatamrita.
Okay.
Okay, so there are no more questions. We can. Nandgopal Prabhu, did you have a question or a comment?
I just wanted to clarify there are many Rudras name given, 11 Rudras name given, and some of them, one of them is Manu and the Vamadeva. These are all different, right? Prabhu, Manu is not the same Manu that we know from the Manvantaras, and
Yeah.
Vamadeva is different from Vamanadev. Right?
They're different. Because actually after the Rudras, then the next creation is Manu. So that we know, of course, are different, but otherwise also, yes, they're completely different. Because once the Rudras are created, they kind of withdraw. We'll see that in the coming discussion. Brahma will say that now, you're troublesome, you're destructive by nature. So use your energy for austerity. And then when the time for the destruction of the universe comes, then you use your destructive capabilities to destroy the universe. So they agree. So they don't appear that much in past tense. Okay, so we'll end here. Vanchkalpatarubhayaschet kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nithai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.